of truth, just like the old game, the grapevine, where someone told a story at the beginning, and by the time it got to the end of the line, it had changed. That's the same as oral history. Be flexible when you're researching. Spelling wasn't consistent back in the day. Sometimes it was just phonetically spelled. So look for those different ways to spell your name. If someone's always saying, instead of King, I get Kane a lot. So I always would have to look for Kane when I can't find someone. Ages, they're also not consistent. People didn't know when they were born. So usually it's 5 years before, 5 years after is usually the right person. But remember, women do kind of tell stories about their ages, so it could be a little further off. If everything else matches, then you have the right person. And another resource you want to look at is the fan club. And the fan club is the friends, associates, and neighbors. The friends, people marry their friends, people marry their neighbors, because that was the only people they had close by them. Associates can be witnesses to a legal document. It can also be a family member. So make note of those people. So as you go through your family history, you might recognize those names that have married into your family or already were in your family. You just didn't know they were related to you. Write down where you find information. So if you found it at Des Moines Public Library and such book on page 10, write that down so that if you ever have to go back again, you can find that information. Just as important as what I said is all research is not online. You do have to get out and physically go to the library, physically go to the State Historical Society or a courthouse. It costs so much to digitize records, and that's why everything's not online. And public libraries are a very good resource, no matter what state or county you're in, check them out. And genealogical societies. As was mentioned, I've been researching for almost 20 years, and the most common question I get is, what do from blacks and whites is, what about 1870? Blacks can't get past 1870, there's a roadblock. That's right after slavery ended. There's no records for them. Well, if you start in 1870, you're not gonna get past 1870. So we don't wanna start there. You wanna start with yourself. You know when you were born, when your kids were born, your parents were married, write that down. That's your starting point. And just as blacks supposedly can't get past 1870, think of it this way. The Jewish or the Irish or the Germans, they have just as much trouble getting back across the pond, back to their natural, from where they came from, immigrated from. The blacks have the exact same thing. And where some blacks can't get past 1870 until more records open up, the same for the German and Irish. They can't get back across to their homeland until more records open up. But if you work your family generation by generation, when you get to 1870, you'll have enough information to just blow right past it, and you won't even realize there was supposed to be a problem there to begin with. So as we begin, I want to show you records you want to start with. And these are records you probably already have in your house, or maybe a family member has. Ask them for it. Talk to your family members, especially if you have someone, the oldest member in your family, you want to talk to them. You want to get their information down, the recollections down. Even if it's just, I had a relative that said Vester King. I couldn't find this Vester. Well, turned out his real name was Sylvester. It took me a few years to put that together, a little slow there. But just those little bit of information, it will help you later in your research. You have the birth, like I mentioned, the birth, marriage, and death. We call it the BMD. If you see it abbreviated, that's what you're going to see. Newspapers. Here you see it's an obituary in an old time funeral home book. And this is a newer funeral book. Baby books, wedding albums. They have, some of them actually ask for family tree information. And if it was filled out, there might be a little bit of information there. Old family photos. Sometimes they have people's names on the back of them. That might give you a clue to someone. And if you're not currently writing on the back of your pictures, please do, because you know who the people are. But in 20, 30 years, when someone else is looking at it, they're going to have no clue who that family member is. Obituaries are another good place, and we'll talk about those. Yearbooks are a good place. And Des Moines Library has all the Des Moines yearbooks, certain years, not every year, but they do have years that are key. And I randomly picked someone from the North High yearbook, and I will show you how I researched that person further. But we'll move on. I'll show you the first document on this list. It's not actually the funeral home book or the memorial book that you get when someone passes on. The visitors, I'm going to show you a page from that. This happens to be my dad's, and I want to show you the clues within these signatures. This one here, it says St. Patrick's Church. That's a clue. Is that where he got married at? Maybe he was baptized there. Look for that information. Go talk to that church. You're going to find information there. And if maybe not, he wasn't belonging to that church, maybe there was someone there that knows what church he did belong to and send you to that church. You want to look for those little clues of information. And I'm focusing on free access to stuff. I'm trying not to make you pay money as you're beginning. So that's a clue. The other clues on here is his brother wrote brother next to his name. His son wrote his son. Well, right there you have two clues. If this was a funeral from 40 years ago, a funeral book from 40 years ago, and you didn't know who his brother was or a sibling, these might be someone you don't know. Another thing, family members come in groups, or family members, but friends also come in groups. In this case, you see a Laura Baker and the three Kings, and this name here is a Humphrey. Is that Laura Baker related to them, to the deceased? Or she's someone who just happened to get in line and the family was off talking to the side, so she just snuck in and signed the book real quick. That's something to think about as you're researching these. One thing I do now is since I've seen this at my dad's funeral, when I go to funerals, I write down if I'm the sister, a co-worker, a niece. And because the next someone else looking at it, they know exactly, oh, that's someone related, or that's a co-worker. I can skip over that person. But I want to know a little bit more about this, where this person worked at or where they worked at. Then they would contact me and I can give them information about their deceased relative. One thing I noticed in funeral books, and I thought about this today, so I'm adding this in. Funeral books ask you to write your address down. Please write your address down in books, because that's helping someone else contact you. And it's a resource. Your address is a resource for them. Your signature is a good keepsake. So stop signing for someone else's name. So Mr. and Mrs., let them both sign. That's just a little pet peeve of mine. I thought I'd pass it on to you. And here's another funeral page book. This is one where, again, there's clues in here. It says your doctor. In the olden days, medical records weren't as strict as they are now. So contact the doctor, contact the hospital he worked at. Maybe he was a local doctor, contact his family and see if he had records in his own home. You never know what you might find out, even if it's just a family history of a disease that you want to watch for later. But check with them. Here's another clue. It says mom here. But is it his mom? Could be his mother-in-law. It could be a lady that he called mom that really isn't his mother. Even though it's a direct information, you still got to look at it as, is it really correct? And in this one, I want to show you again, it has the names. You have Davis, Lloyd, Beecham, Davis, Lloyd. Oh, look, there's a Johnson. Is she the same as Mrs. Laura Baker? Someone who snuck in here, or is she part of the family? But I'm taking these people are going to be related because they all came together. And one thing I do is, I know who the signature is. But again, 20 years from now, does someone else know who it is? I'm sure right now you're trying to figure out, how did you know that said Lloyd there? Because it doesn't look like Lloyd. When I was putting this program together, I see I need to do more research, write down more names, because I couldn't figure out what this first name here. I figured out it was Jeff. So I'll have to go back and write his name in here for future people. And I periodically go back and look at them, because as time goes on, you forget how someone wrote their name. And someone who isn't a relative, when you first look at it, as you do research, you might find, oh, that's a relative. Let me go back in here. And then again, you'll see a grouping and find some more information. I'm going to show you those two pages together side by side to give you some more information. The three arrows that you see here, those are the three people on these pages that are not related. Mom really isn't his mom. You'd find that as you research. You'd find out it actually is his mother-in-law. So there's another name to research. And these are her daughters and their kids, so his nieces and nephews. This is his wife. And this is my dad. This is my brother, Andre, my brother, Kerry, and this Robin Humphrey that I'm sure you couldn't read either. That's another name I have to go back and add in there, because I didn't, at the time I could read it. I can still read it, but I'm now realizing people won't be able to read it. So just think about things outside the box. It looks like it's primary information, firsthand accounts, but maybe is it really? So always think about it. And now I'm going to move on to actually doing some research where you guys came from. Well, that was research, but this is really the nuts and bolts of the research that I like to do. And this is evidence is only as good as the informant. This is where I keep stressing, think about what someone is saying or what's going on here. This is a birth register. I'll clear this up a little bit. It says the mother is Sarah Ellen McCauley and James Wilson Wesley. And it's a birth register for Mildred Wesley. And we're going to follow this family in several different documents. But the key to focus on is the parents' names, the Sarah and the James. And you would assume the parents are going to be the informant on a birth register, but are they really? Could the person who someone else wrote it down and misheard them and wrote it down wrong? I know I have a case where it was actually the grandmother who was reporting the birth of her two granddaughters. So it's not always, can't always assume that is the person actually providing the information. The next record, we're still following Mildred, but this actually is her delayed birth certificate that she is now trying to get. I guess they didn't realize she actually had a certificate out there, so she's trying to get one probably for Social Security applicant, file for Social Security card is what I'm assuming. I don't really know, but it's Mildred again, and this time her parents are listed as Sarah A. Kenny. Her name is already changed. The other record says Sarah Ellen McCulley, changed slightly. Her dad is still James W. Wesley, and W probably stands for Wilson, so we'll go with that. But who was the affidavit? This Mildred Johnson. Did Mildred one provide the information, or did someone else provide the information? Well, I know who Mildred is because, again, I'm using examples from my own family. Mildred is the married name of Myrtle, so she's giving the affidavit. And this form is a little bit longer than what you see here, but it does ask for a family Bible. She provided a family Bible, a marriage record, another document to show her birth information. So you want to look for those family Bibles. And a lot of family Bibles, you also find funeral programs stuck in them. So see what's stuck in between those pages, because there might be family history there. If you ever go to the State Historical Society, they do not have any of the information that was used as proof to determine someone's birth record on a delayed record. They gave it all back. So I'll save you the trouble of looking. I've already looked there. The next record is, we're looking at Lonnie Wesley, which is Mildred's, or sorry, I keep saying Mildred, but I mean Myrtle Wesley's brother's marriage. And here the affidavit is given by Mrs. Walter Ferguson, which is the mother of the bride. So did Lonnie give her the information, or did Lonnie supply the information, write down the information himself? Because again, we're looking at the names. The father is James Wesley, the mother is Sarah McKinney. We have another last name for her. So point that out to you. And the next record we're going to go to here is we're going to jump to Sarah's death certificate and see how her name is there. Well, her name is Sarah Wesley, 2 R's. Don't worry about the spelling. We know she's married to Wesley, so that's her married name. So we don't have to really worry about that. That's okay. And her father and mother is given as William and Annie Kinney. And over here, I'll highlight that, the informant is James W. Wesley, which is her husband. But you got to think, they're from Virginia and we're in Iowa. Did he ever meet her parents? Is he trying to go off memory at a time of grief, trying to recall what her parents' name is? When people are in grief, things are information is misapplied. So you have to watch that. The only thing on a death certificate that you can really say is accurate is the date of death, because everything else is secondhand and someone's trying to recall at a time of grief. And I should say the signature of the doctor who signed the death certificate, that's original as well. And we're going to jump from Sarah's death certificate to James's death certificate. And his name is James Edmund. Here it is here, James Edmund Wesley. And the informant is William Wesley. Well, this isn't asking you who the informant is. So who was William Wesley? We'll come back to that in a minute. But I want to point out that this William Wesley did not know the parents of James. It just says no first name, last name Wesley, unknown mother. Sometimes you'll see, I can't think of the other word. I'll think of it in a minute. Sometimes you'll see unknown, or just don't know. You'll see because the person didn't know. But did this William Wesley, did he really know that James's dad's name was Wesley? Or was he just going because his last name is Wesley? That must have been the dad's last name. Remember, some of these people might have been born before slavery and lived with their mothers, and that could be his mother's last name. So consider that as well as you're doing your research. But just like you know, William is the son of James. I don't know where this Edmund came from. And I'll show you a breakdown of from all the documents we looked at, how the different informants supply the name. Sarah had 4 different last names. We can discount Wesley because we know that she was married, so she has 3, Macaulay, Kinney, and McKinney. See how the phonetics kind of sound? They could be close. If someone had an accent, it could change how that sounded a little bit. And James was pretty consistent. It's James Wesley, W, until you get to the very end, when someone else is giving information, it's James Edmund. And to this day, I have not figured out where the Edmund comes from, but I'll work on it. I'm going to figure it out one day, but I don't know why he has that name. Maybe he had 2 middle names. But sometimes you don't actually figure information out. It just eventually comes to you. And we're going to move from this, still looking at James a little bit, but we're going to move to obituaries. And I'm showing you this for 2 reasons. One is, here's James's obituary here. It doesn't really say when he died, it just said, or what date he died. It says he died on Saturday. So how do you determine when James died? Well, this is a Tuesday paper, count back to Saturday, and that's the date that James died. Easy, but you got to think of little tricks like that. And obituaries, as we know today in the paper, it has the big heading that says obituary. But back in the day, it didn't say that. James is actually in the middle of the story, a column. It just, you have to read the whole paper, and I found this. If I hadn't read the whole paper, I would miss that he had died. If I was just looking for obituary, I'd skip right by it. Sometimes they don't even have that. It just might be a card of thanks. The card of thanks can say, it might not have the deceased's name, where here it does. It says Henry Berkeley. It could just say, we lost our beloved, and we want to thank you for the community for coming out to support. But this is a good one, and that's why I showed it to you, because it has a deceased's name. It tells you the funeral home that's handled the service, and then it gives family relationships that's actually giving you the card of thanks. Again, you might just say the family of Henry Berkeley or the family of so-and-so, so you don't get that. But with these 3 names here, we've got 3 different people to search on. And why is his name, if sorry, I don't know how to say that, Simpson, we'll say. If Simpson is his son, why does Simpson have a different last name? Is it his stepson? Something to look at. If this Floyd Fike is a nephew, he must have had a sister by that name that married someone with that name. So we've got like 3 different things here. That's cool. And then there's Fowler Funeral and Sons. That's a funeral home locally if you're not from Des Moines. We want to contact them and look for their funeral home records, because it's going to tell us who buried them, who requested the burial, and other documents. I'm going to talk a little bit more about funeral homes in a minute, but Fowler Funeral Homes are located at the State Historical Society, who is currently closed, but you can access those for free there. And we'll move on to what you consider obituary. And this is Myrtle, is obituary. I'm going to talk about each of the 3 parts of her obituary in the next segment here. And this is, as you can see, the front page. And this is an older obituary. And I love obituaries, as you heard earlier, because it gives so much family history. We have her full name. If we didn't know her full name, we have her middle name there. We have when she was born, when she died. It's like, that's, if you don't have that information, you might, the first time you see it is on a funeral program or what they call memorial cards. Here it tells you her church, says she attended that church. Again, maybe she married there. You want to look for those records, anything you can find in the church baptism records. But this is my favorite part of these older funeral programs that we no longer see, or very seldom see on funeral programs today. It tells you what cemetery a person was buried at and what location. So you can go visit the person, take pictures of their headstone, see who's around buried next to them. Is it a spouse, a daughter that died earlier? Maybe it's a sister who died. Don't just look to the left or to the right or up front and back. Branch out a ways, because you never know. You bury family near family as much as you can. Maybe the spot next to her was already taken. So in my case, my dad's buried 2 plots off from his grandfather, and my brother, who died young, is buried 2 rows up, but he's a direct line to my dad. So if I hadn't gone 2 rows up, I wouldn't know that that was his son. And then my grandmother's buried a little farther off from her father. So I've got a little whole family plot in this one little area. So check those names and write them down. If they sound like, oh, that sounds familiar, I think I recognize that name, write it down. Because you know them. It could be a family friend, but you know them. And now we'll move into the middle part of her funeral program. And I'll show you here. Let me click in here. Well, first, let me read this section. It says, Myrtle Johnson, the daughter of Sarah A. Kinsey and James W. Wesley. We have another last name for Sarah to go off of and look for. That's key. But I wanted to bring it in a little closer here because it tells you her husband's name, when they were married and where. So now you can go look for the marriage records. And then that's what I have over here. And it says the daughter, it says Johnson Castile. Well, we know she's married and we have her married last name. Let's look for that marriage certificate. And Adam doesn't have a wife listed or different last name because he's a male, of course. But if you look, it says preceded in death and leaves to mourn. That's what you're looking for in an obituary because it gives you their family history. It tells you who the parents were. If it's not listed further up, it tells you who the siblings are that are living or deceased. And in this case, it says he is a daughter-in-law, Kathy Johnson. Well, what do you know? That's probably Adam's wife. Let's look for their marriage record. I would look in Des Moines and I would look in Chicago since she's currently living in Chicago. Here it says she has a daughter, Kaylin. Didn't we just see that they only had 2 children? What's this daughter connection? And they can tell you that Kaylin's mother died young, so they raised her as a daughter, and that's where they got the daughter from. So you have other family here that you can research and look for. And that's the key. Watch for women's maiden names. Say, I'm Ricki King, I've never been married, so my name's gonna be Ricki King from now on. But say I got married in 2 years and one of my relatives died and my name is now Ricki Jones. You know, I married from the last obituary to the current obituary, I've married. So it narrows the field of when you want to look for a marriage record. So watch for those maiden names. And sometimes women go back, even in the 1800s, they go back to their maiden name. So if the name goes from a married name back to a maiden name, look for a divorce record or a separation. You might not always find a divorce record, and you can find those in newspapers. In the back of the funeral program is who handled the service. Usually there's only one listed, but in this case, she was in Chicago when she passed, so there's 2 funeral homes. You want to look at both funeral homes because the informant in Chicago may not be the informant in Des Moines, and so different information about it might have been shared with them. There are different people making the payments. Anything you can think of is going to be in a funeral home. In the 1920s, all you might find is so-and-so was interred in a different town. But at least you know you need to go to the new town and not the town you're currently like in Des Moines. I don't need to look for a burial in Des Moines because they were shipped to New London, Missouri. So that's why you want to talk to the funeral home if you can. But remember, they're privately owned businesses. They don't have to share any information with you. Most do, but they don't have to. Be polite. That's going to get them to want to share with you. Have as much information as you can. Don't go in there going, my family member died, I think, with this. Sorry. Don't go in there saying my family member died within the last 3 years. Go with more specific information as they died, in February of this year, or narrow the focus as much as you can of when they died, so that the funeral home's not going to do your research for you. One thing to let you know, if you're in Des Moines, Hamilton's Funeral Home does have they do keep. I'm so sorry. Hamilton Funeral Home does have I'm gonna have to shut the door. Sorry. I'm so sorry about that, guys. Hamilton Funeral Home does have keep track of obituaries. So if you contact them, they can get you a copy of an original obituary if you don't have it. You made me lose my train of thought. Estes Funeral Home records are with Mrs. Estes. Last I used her, she did give me information, but I don't know if she still is. I mentioned Fowler's and Friends. Fowler Funeral Homes is at State Historical Society. Iowa Genealogical Society has copies of those, but they are a membership-based organization. So if you want to use their records, you can do a yearly membership or a daily access to it. But again, do look at those records. They are the best source you can find. And I'm sorry, it's got me all confused what I'm trying to do here. The newspapers are another resource you want to use. And in this case, I'm pointing out 5 different sections here. It's actually turns out to be 13 sentences. And it's including all of my family history in this one newspaper column here. I did not know it at the time I first found the column. I was looking for the death of Malcolm Wesley. So I got that, immediately went off, did some more research somewhere else, and blah, 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 years later came back when I was researching this A.L. Crittenden, and this popped up. And in my research, I found out she wrote for the Iowa Bystander, which is where this newspaper is clippings from. And when I actually read the column, that's when I found out all the family connections you can see here that's listed there. So when you're reading the newspaper, don't just look for certain sections, read the whole paper. The Iowa Bystander did sections on like Centerville, Ottumwa, Omaha, Nebraska. Every once in a while you see one from Missouri. Don't just read the section where your family came from. Read all the towns because people visit it. There's news saying, in fact, here, there's one, where is it here? Click up here. Mrs. William Jackson from Omaha, Nebraska, who has been visiting in Des Moines with a friend, Miss C.C. Johnson. Well, they're in the Centerville news. Don't you think if you looked at the Omaha news section, it's going to say that she went to go visit this person? It might not. It might only be in one place. But it's a good clue to know that if they're going to visiting friends or family, they came from that area. So if you lose family in your research, I'm like, where do they go to? If they're visiting people in your town, it might tell you where they came from. So that's another clue that you can look at. And I was going to say here is when I didn't pay attention and read it all, I missed the fact that Myrtle had a brother named Roy Wesley. And it's Benjamin Roy or Roy Benjamin. I've seen it both ways. But it took me years to find this relative because I didn't bother to read the whole paper. So I've got 3 different family members, Roy, Malcolm, and this Myrtle, is Wesley. Her maiden name was Wesley. So I have 3 people in that family that I didn't have. And now we have her aunt's name. And then here we have a sibling, as children. It builds upon itself, so you get more and more information. And that's what's so much fun and what I love about genealogy. I'm sorry, I apologize for you. But the next thing, we're gonna actually get into the research. This is the fun part that you guys came for. And I wanna say, how do you begin your research? If you don't know anything about someone, where do you begin? You don't have to, you can know very little about a person to start. So don't just think, I only know their name, I don't know what to do. Well, that's where I started this research question at. I had no information, and I wanted to use something that was North's library. I went to someone in that side of town. So I went to the North yearbooks from the Des Moines Public Library, went online, just looked oldest newspaper yearbook they had, and found someone that was Black. And I liked this lady's name, so I picked her. And before I began my research, I had to have a research question. And I picked, who are the parents of Pramila Carey? I don't know if I'm saying her name right. But you want to have that research question, because if you don't, you're going to go down a rabbit hole. Like I could be looking for her and like, oh, this person, this thing's interesting. And now I'm going to research this person. The whole day's gone. I'm researching someone that's not related to me. I don't care about. They just sounded interesting at the time. But instead of doing that, I have a research question or goal, set that. It doesn't have to be a question, be a goal that you want to focus on for that day. So when I get to that rabbit hole and I see that interesting person, what I do is I just jot it down and say, this is what I want to do. I bookmark maybe that section on my browser, but I want to be able to go back to find that information again. I don't want to actually research it right then. I just want to go do it later. That keeps you focused, and that's why you have a research goal. And one thing I remember, this picture might be the only picture someone has of the relative is in the yearbook or an obituary program. That's why I like obituaries. I didn't mention that earlier. But we'll move on. Remembering our goal is who are the parents of Pramila. This is my information I started with, the yearbook photo. And I went, it was a 1916 yearbook. I went to see if she was a junior or a senior that year, and she was a junior. So figuring that she, I'm assuming, I don't know, that at 18, she would graduate like we do today. I estimate her age at 16 to 17 years old. And then I did the math and put her born about 1898, 1899. And then what did I do from there? Well, this is 1916. I want to go to use a census record. That's a good starting point resource. And I went to the next census year that are available, which is the 1920 federal census. And look, I found, and I just put in Pramila Carey, nothing else, and I found a Pramila Carey. Except there's a problem. She's 58 years old. We know that's not Our Lady. She should only be in her 20s in 1920. But I kept this in mind. Is this her mother? Is this an aunt that she was named after? We don't know. But so you can't assume, oh, we found her, she's named after her mother. We don't know that. But you want to keep in mind of who the kids are that are listed here, because those will be good resources when we find them again. Is this the same family? So things you look at. And this census, I'm only showing you a little bit of it because I want to focus in, but you want to look at the whole census and gather all the information off of that, because all of it's going to be key in your research. And since I didn't find her in 1920, she could have married, she's out of the house, I decided to go back to 1910, the federal census, they're only taken every 10 years, so that'd be 1910 is the next one. And I do find her. And now she's in the household with Pramila and Spencer, the same people that were in the last household. And we know it's the same people because the daughter was Ontario and one of the daughters were Bernice. So we know it's the same family. We found her with her parents. And you're probably thinking, this is just way too easy. I'm not going to do this. It's as simple as that. Just take the first steps to do it. You'll realize those small details is what's harder to get. It's easier to find them in a time and place when you know where they're supposed to be. You know your family member lived in, say, Hannibal, Missouri in 1940. Look at the 1940 census and find them there. If they're not there, look at 1930. You know where they're at a certain time, start looking for them and work your way through all the census. You want to collect every year. But a good thing on this one is that made it a little bit easier was her name, but the spelling changes on it. But if you look at all the different names here, these unusual Rodolphus, Ulysses, those names are the ones you want to look for. If you have a last name Jones and name's Bill Jones, look for someone that's America Jones. There's not going to be as many America Jones as there are Bill Joneses, and that helps you find your relatives. You don't always have to go in a straight path, direct, this is my grandfather, great-grandfather. Maybe I need to go over to my grandfather's sister and research her family to work my way back to my grandfather. So you research the whole family, not just a straight line, because if you do a straight line, that's where you're going to get stuck at. And that's where you're not going to be able to move forward. And that's what I did originally when I first started. And it took me years to get that through my head. That's how I researched, but I was learning on my own and didn't really have the training I'm trying to pass on to you guys, so you don't do the same mistake I did. Once I ventured off and researched my great-grandfather's sister, the world opened up to me. And it was so, oh gosh, it's unbelievable how much information came out of me just moving off path just slightly. And I've researched 3 or 4 of his siblings now because I went off path just a little bit. And I'll move on to, I want to do a little bit more about Pramila, just to see maybe I can find some more records on her. So I went back another census record to 1900, and this is a good census. And I'm gonna point out a little more details on this one. And this one, she's 2 years old, still her family, and she's born in January. So we know we have the right person when she was born. And on this census, if you want to know how many kids someone had, this census actually asked the wife, how many children are living? That's this column here, this 13. And how many children have you had? That's 13. How many are living? That's 10. So we know she has 3 kids that are not living. So we need to find them. So they're not going to be on this census. So we want to find them. We want to build the whole family, not just one living. You want to gather them all. And this 19 is how many years they've been married. So we can do the math and figure out what year they were married and look for their marriage record. But as I mentioned, you want to look at the unusual names. This Alabama. Did they pass through Alabama on their way to Iowa? Australia, who knows where that one came from, but it's a good name to research. McKinley, there's clues. Another clue is if you see a family, you see someone was born in Virginia, someone in North Carolina, someone in Alabama, Iowa, and then you see them back to North Carolina, and they're in the birth order, it's telling you where they've lived at. You need to look at records of all those places. That's another good clue that you see here. So that's things I want to pass. I'm trying to pass on as much as I can to you. This record I'm going to show you is Pramilla's birth record. And I'm showing this for two reasons. One is this is a transcription of what the actual image document is. But when you see this, don't stop here, because all the information isn't recorded there. And there's that one nugget of truth could be not recorded there. Or there could be a handwritten note on the original document. So you always want to go to the original. Don't just look at the transcriptions when you see it. Go to the original. The other reason I want to show you this is for this reason here. FamilySearch.org, that's where I did my research at. It's a free website through the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints. You have to register to access their records, but it's free. Sometimes as you're looking at records, you might have to re-register. And the record's still going to be free. That's the key. But you have to re-register because states like to record how much activity their records are getting. Say, Iowa birth records. They want to see how many people are actually going out looking at their birth records. And what they do is they have a lot of activity. Then they pull the records after the contract with the Mormons end. Should say Latter-day Saints. They take the records offline and then put them on their website, their state or county website, and make money that way. So when you find a record, don't do all bookmark this and put this on a public family tree, online tree. Don't do that. Well, you can do that, I should say, but also download it to your computer, because if the record goes away off of Family Search, what you save to that online tree also goes away. Only the information is going to be there, but the actual document's going to be gone. So if you need to refer to that document in a few years, maybe because I think that witness, that associate, that witness, was he a family member? You're not going to be able to look at that record again because you didn't save it. So save it to your tree. And the other I guess there's three reasons for I showed you this. The third is this Family Search Affiliate Library. Iowa Genealogical Society is the affiliate library here in Des Moines. And as I mentioned earlier, they do have membership fees and daily access. But talk to them about accessing for Family Search records. I don't know how they handle those. But if you go there, what do you know? I'm on their IP address. It recognizes I'm at their location. I saved this record to a source box. I saved this, so when I get there, I can pull it right up. And now I have the original image in front of me that I can download to my computer and take home. And one thing I should say, when you're looking at original records, immediately transcribe those records. So you write down that information, especially if you're at a library, write down the information because it could be pointing you to another record. And while you're there, you can grab that record too. So don't just, I'll make copies and leave and do it later. Do it right while you're right there. Take the time. It'll save you time from having to go back, especially if you're going out of state to look at this record. But again, the Family Search Affiliate Library, Iowa Genealogical Society, you can look at the original record there. You can also, State Historical Society, if they were open, you could look at the microfilm of this original record, but you can do it either way. But currently there's no open date for the State Historical Research Library. Keep my fingers crossed they open soon. I've got records I need to look at. But let's go back to Pramila and see what conclusions we found and what we had to begin with. We figured out her parents' name. She was born January 3rd, 1898. That was the exact date from the birth record transcription. Her parents' names, Spencer Calvin Carey and Pramila Gordon is her mother's maiden name. Now we can go another generation back on her mother. We have where they came from, Staunton, Virginia, so we can look at records there. We didn't find her in 1920 census, so did she marry? Where is she at? We have to research that more. That's be our next steps. We'd want to get that original birth certificate. We want to get her marriage record and her death certificate. And she's not the 1925 Iowa census, but that's a good census. We want to have your family there. And I'll be talking about that. And then, as I said, again, make sure you're collecting that fan club information. But in case you're wondering, I did go a little further on this, and I did find out she did marry and she moved to Detroit, Michigan, where she married a Donald Thomas, and she died there in 1979. So hopefully someone out there maybe is related to this Camilla Carey that went to North High School that I don't know. Oh, you know, let me go back a slide. I didn't show you one thing why I picked her. The address. I'm sure you read this on the slide, but this address, here is the street name here. It's in Oxford, and this 2415 is her house number. So I know where she lives at, and I can go to like a city directory. It's kind of like a old telephone book, and you can record where people lived at in time. So if you can't find them on a census in 1920, well, you can find them there in the city directory. That kind of helps you move along between census years. But that's sorry, I forgot to tell you that. This is a 1925 census, and Iowa did census every 5 years. So the federal is on the zeros, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s. Iowa would be 1905, 1915, 1925. So you want to get those state census as well as the federal census. And the 1925 census is the gold mine census. And this is where people from other states want their family to be in Iowa at. You got to remember, it covers 3 pages. They all have different information. The 3rd page I'm not showing you because they didn't have the key information I want to show you, but there is a 3rd page. They're not indexed. So when you're like looking at family search, you're only going to find information on this 1st page people. The 2nd page people you're not going to find. But this is the key, the gold part that everyone wants is on that 2nd page. So make sure you look to that 2nd page. Like here it has, the mother is Maud Proctor. And when I go to 2nd page, it tells me her parents are Henry Smith and Mary Brown. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Henry Smith and Mary Brown. And I'm pointing this out to you for 2 things. This here, well, I'll show you here. This is Missouri. That's where they're from. So we know, okay, let's go there. That's where her parents are from. And on the 1st page, it also said, I don't have it on here, but it does tell that Maud came from Missouri as well. This is something unusual I had not seen before. Is this enumerator? This is why you want to look at the original records and not the transcription, because things might be, when someone's transcribing it, might only have a spot for Missouri. So they leave out this information. Edina and Kirksville. We literally know exactly what town they came from in Missouri. We can literally go to that town now and do research and stop. Well, Missouri's big. Where do we go? Well, they're telling us. I've never seen that on a census until I found this one to show you guys today. The other thing is these numbers here are the ages of the parents. This blank here, we're taking they died. That's why it's blank, because there's no age. But if you do find an age, that person is still living. So what are you going to do next? You're going to go look for their name in the 1925 census, and hopefully they live in Iowa. Because, you know, if their one family member moved, maybe the other one moved. Keep your fingers crossed they live in Iowa. And that'll get you back another generation. So you have Maud, the daughter, Mary, the mother. Well, we'll say Julia. We'll say Maud, we have hers. We say Julia, we have hers. We find Julia's. Now we have Julia's parents. We have 3 generations of family within this one census. That's why people want to have their family in Iowa in 1925. It's my favorite census to look at. Now you have all of this information. What do you do with it? You record it on the 4 generation chart. And this is the birth. B is birth, where, death, where, marriage, where. That's what that stands for. The father is always on the top line. The mother's always going to be the bottom line. And you're going to be the ancestor who you research. If it's a different generation, that'll be your ancestor. I'll be handing these papers out to you. If you email me, I can give you copies of these. I've gathered this information together for free for you, so you don't have to do all the research. This is a family unit chart. And here, it records whole information. So if you're the wife, here's your information, here's your husband information, there's your children information. But if you're the child, and then the wife and husband is going to be your parents. So that gives you a broader picture of your whole family together, instead of just your parents as the previous chart. This here is a page. It just tells you about every census. So it tells you what information that was gathered in 1790, what information was gathered in 1850. There's 2 pages. It's for every census up to 1940, because that's currently what's out. 1950 comes out next year in April. And this is where you want to mark, okay, I have person was born in 1847. Mark these out because I'm not going to find any census for them there. Mark X all the ones you have. If they died in 1856, mark these out because you're not going to find them there. You want to find them for everyone that they're alive at. So you have the state and the federal census, the same thing. I have 2 pages of where you find the information at. Don't rush down, just send me an email, I can give you this information. But I do have links that to Iowa Bystander, Chronicle America, you can find it online for free. But the key part of that is Des Moines Library has helped you. They actually have indexed this information. You go to their search tab, it tells you what they have available. And there's a little far down, it says obituaries. Or if you search for a book, you search for a book, then it'll pop up obituaries. Click on that, put the person's name in, and it'll tell you if it's the Des Moines Register or Iowa Bystander. It'll give you the page number, the column. Then you can go to the library. Only the Central Library has the original microfilms. You can pull it up and print it off right there, or go on to Chronicle America and do it there. Chronicle America only has it 1921. So Des Moines Library is a great place to go. And what do? You're starting the research. You've gotten all this information I gave you. I suggest look at some books as you're starting your research. Look at some books. My favorite is Black Roots. Is my goal. That's where I got started at. It's a little dated because he doesn't mention ancestry and family tree as much because ancestry is just getting out. But he tells you how to record that information and where to find it later, and that's key. And how to do courthouse research. So look at these books. This is the newest one. It tells you what records are available in each state, county, when like birth records started being issued in Iowa in 1880. It tells you that information that you want to look for. And they have a lot more books than this. They're all good. They all give different subjects. You don't have to look for a Black book. It could be an Italian book. You're all going to have the basic research. Just read about it and how they do it in their process. And not to be least, write down my email address, and I'll send you those information that I gathered for you for free. That'll help you get your research started. Don't wait until you get my email. Start writing it down now. Grab a paper. Write down the information you have and start your research. FamilySearch.org. And I want to leave you with these parting words that I started with. Remember, everyone is a beginner at one time, even researchers that have been doing it for some time. Be flexible in the spelling. Ages vary by at least 5 years. Look for that fan club. Write down where you found the information so you can go back and find it again. And last but not least, have fun. Thank you. And please, sorry, it went a little long. Do you have any questions? I'm willing to ask, and I'm willing to stay a little late. And if we don't get them all answered, please send me an email and I'll personally answer your email to you. And I'll go back to Jenny. You're on mute, Jenny.
Sorry about that. It looks like Randy also threw into the chat that the State Historical Society is temporarily offering free remote access to the newspaper archives. So do feel free to check that out as well. Does anybody have any questions or things they would like to ask? I'm not sure if you throw the hands up reaction, I can always unmute you as well. Oh, Yvonne asks, in writing on the back of photos, do you need to use a special pen or pencils? No.
Yes, you want to use an archival pencil or pen, and you can get it at Walmart. Just make sure it says archive pencil, because a pen will bleed through and a pencil. If you don't write it, don't use a pen at all. But if you want to use a pencil, use it. Don't write across someone's face, write on the bottom. So if it does bleed through, it's not going to bleed through on their face.
Awesome.
I have one I didn't mention that I will be in the paperwork that if you email me. Online, I show you examples of paper because I prefer paper, but you can save your tree to ancestry.com or to familysearch.org. I don't suggest putting your whole tree out there because they're easy access that someone else will take it and merge it with theirs. Family tree, it's a combined tree, so anyone can go out there and change it. So you can put something in, they don't like it, they can change it. And they're giving your information away for free, and they make money off that. Not the Family Search, but the Ancestry does. So keep it personal a little bit and just put a little bit out there so a cousin or relative bites on it. And there's programs you can use, and I recommend, it's in the packets, Roots Magic, and you have a free version that you can use. And it's Roots Magic as one word. And it's Roots Magic Essentials that you can download. And if you decide to continue with your genealogy, then purchase it. Don't try not to spend a lot of money when you don't have to. Make sure you're really going to stay focused with it.
Excellent. Really good tip about writing it down so that you don't lose access. That is important. Jerica also says you can use Excel to create a family personal computer if you have privacy concerns. Fair point. And Charles has a question. He says, on the 1880 US Census, I have a relative whose mother is listed as being from Africa, but I don't know where to go from there.
That's the 1880 census?
Mm-hmm.
You want to find her 1870 census. Charles, send me an email. I'll look at your information and give you some advice. But you want to look at 1870. You want to see if you can find her married. But there's, depending on what state it is, there's records in between 1880 and 1870 that you can look at to get you back another, maybe a year or two, or back even further. Africa could mean that's where she might have been born at. But that's not where she was at the year prior to that, or 5 years prior to that. What else could you do? And if it has on there, look at her kids as information as well. If she has any other family stats, look at their information to see if you can find them prior to 1880. And eventually you're going to have, not all Blacks were slaves, I should say that. A lot of them were free. So that's because you're in 1880, you could find her in 1870, 1860 before slavery. Eventually you're going to probably have to look at some slave records. Not everyone will, but you will. So you have to know who the slave owner is to be able to know what records to look at. And when you're searching, don't put in Black, just put the person's name in, first and last name. If you have the middle initial, leave it out. Make it a broad search, narrow it down by using the middle name if it's too broad, and then add the Black or mulatto. Because Blacks were sometimes listed as Black, sometimes it was just the father that was listed as Black and no one else in the household. And sometimes they were listed as white. It was an interpretation of what person saw on how they recorded them. So that's why you want to leave that out in your first original search on a person. I think I told you. And thank you for that tip on the newspaper archives. I did not know that.
Charles says, thanks. All right, anybody else, any other questions? So
any concerns or anything that you might you're working like Charles is working on something that you might have a quick question I might be able to answer for you? Okay, then my challenge is to you, start working on your family tree now. Don't put it off. Even what little you do now, someone else can pick up on. And I know my family, they didn't talk about the family. The one grandmother, my dad's side, didn't talk about it. But as she got older, I finally got her to start talking. I was able to research more of her family. And that's the key. Just get as much as you down on paper. Even if you decide you don't want to research your family, write your own story. Tell where you were born at, what you liked as a kid growing up, what sports you played, what your favorite food was. That's something, it's going to help someone later in life.
Absolutely. Well, seeing no more questions, I will be sending out in the next week, sometime next week, a quick survey about the program to see what you thought, if you had any technical issues, that sort of thing. But in that same email, I will make sure that Ricki's email address is in there just in case you've missed it. So yeah, please let us know if there's any other genealogy questions you have, anything else that you'd like us to talk about in the future. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Ricki, so much for this presentation. I have copious notes on tiny pieces of paper right now.
Thank you. Sorry about the dog.
So Zoom reality, right?
Yes.
Excellent.